Well, welcome to the second video on classroom management. As we saw in the first video, we looked at assertive discipline and concept that to treat all kids the same, you treat them the same. Well, here we're going to look at the other end of the continuum and look at what Glasser says in control theory. To treat all kids the same, you have to treat them differently. Let's see what that's about. Well, how do you make your students' days happy and yet still maintain an active learning environment? Well, kids will live up to your management plan if you know exactly what it is and you have positive and negative reinforcements. But Glasser also takes it to a little higher level. And as sometimes we see our teachers progress and become master teachers, they're more in the Glasser orientation, in the sense that to treat all kids the same, and you still believe that you're going to treat all the kids the same, but to treat them the same, you have to treat them differently to actually be equal. And so they take maybe the orientation that Glasser proposes, and he says that almost all human behavior is driven by five needs, to satisfy five basic human needs, and those are survival, that we misbehave because we're hungry, or we haven't slept, or we're tired, or they don't feel loved or belong to that class, that the teacher cares or the other kids see him or her as a friend. Or third, that they see themselves as having no say, no power with their classmates or with what's happening to them in your classroom. Or they're not given the freedom to somewhat be themselves, the freedom to make choices, to be who they are, or to have fun. That these five basic human needs are what motivate almost all of what we do, Glasser says. And when you look at what you do as a teacher, and why you have certain hobbies, why you have certain friends, why you do certain things, it will actually fall into one of these needs, to meet one of these five needs, he would say. He's not a great presenter, but let's listen to Dr. William Glasser.
My name is Dr. William Glasser. I'm president of the William Glasser Institute. The purpose of the Institute on our logo is teaching choice theory to the world. And I'm the originator of the ideas of choice theory, and choice theory is what I call the mother book. I've written many books, but I call this the mother book because choice theory is what we go back to all the time. And other books are specific applications of choice theory. And the other book I think is important to this particular conference, which is concerned about the human rights of children, is that children's human rights are often violated by a field which I'm a member of. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist, MD, and other psychiatrists are also MDs and could be board-certified. What I'm different from most psychiatrists is I focus on what I call mental health, because I believe there is such a thing as mental health, and I also believe that it can be taught.
Okay, and let's look at his theory as he tries to teach it. And a teacher's job is to maintain mentally healthy children. And to do that, your management system could be structured in such a way that it deals with moving kids up that hierarchy of needs and understanding that hierarchy of needs. So let's look at his theory. What he proposes is that three things: that behavior is always a matter of choice, and it's the child that makes that choice and nobody else. And it's the teacher's job to help that student make good choices. And if you really look at kids as they grow older, and looking at my career as a secondary teacher, so many times I would have to counsel parents that said, I've lost control of my child. What can I do to gain it back? I've taken the car away from them. I've done this, I've done that, and none of those punishments work. And by Glasser's orientation is probably kind of too late, because as we might see the progression of making choices, as a child gets older, he would be given the freedom to make healthy choices. And as he didn't make healthy choices, he paid the consequences. So he learned, but he had control over his own behavior, and there were some consequences. And he had a lot of freedom to make bad choices. And those kids that were ridden, that were always controlled, with a very close management system by the parents, it didn't give them too many choices in life. When they got to college, where there wasn't anybody overseeing them, making sure they behaved, and everything was now open to them, they didn't make good choices because they weren't used to having that freedom. And so a lot of times teachers that allow kids to make choices, they're not going to make good choices. And we have to modify that environment so they learn that there are better choices. And that's what this orientation involves. And secondly, kids will make behavioral choices as a result to meet a need. And if bad behavior really gets what they want, they're going to continue to make bad choices. So a lot of times, the teacher will have to change that environment so the bad behavior doesn't get them what they want. If they get recognition for talking, and that's what they most want, and you continue to give them that recognition with punishment, they will continue to do those sorts of things. And it doesn't make sense. And then the third one is that the teacher has to show very sincerely that they care about students and they want them to make good choices. And that's kind of a fine fence to walk, to get them to make good choices.
Mr. Hill, there's something wrong with Scooter.
Don't worry about it. I kept the receipt.
Oops! Someone forgot to boost!
Mr. Hill, there's something wrong with Scooter. You saved Scooter! Yeah!
Minute Maid in hand with a natural
I
energy.
like that commercial, but a lot of times when kids come to you with problems, that they may seem rather trivial to you because of their age, and you know that this too will pass, but yet to them at the moment it is a serious endeavor. And that when you listen and actually care to accommodate them, that brings a lot of trust day after day. Well, Cantor's management plan starts out a lot like Cantor's. Again, he expects teachers to establish rules, but many times he wants students to participate in that rule making in a class meeting. And then you stress that it's the student's responsibility, not the teacher's, for them to act and to follow those rules. They're responsible for their own behavior. And then third, just like Cantor, accept no excuses for misbehavior. But we're going to provide some alternatives to correct that misbehavior so that you can start acting the way that you're supposed to. Well, he suggests that we enforce reasonable consequences for misbehaviors that meet the need being expressed. And the hard part is to figure out what needs not being met and what consequence would fit meeting that need. And here he said there are 7 things that don't work. He called them the 7 deadly habits in the Quality School book. And that's criticizing kids, or blaming, or complaining, nagging, threatening, punishing, or bribing. And I know as a parent I've done all 7 of those. And as a teacher I've done all 7 of those. But he says those do no good. In fact, they do more harm in establishing a caring, trusting relationship between the child and the teacher. And then he said there are 7 caring habits that should be replaced of supporting a kid's behavior, of encouraging, of listening, of accepting with almost unconditional regard, and trusting and repeating and negotiating consequences where one size does not fit all. And I think some of those will become apparent as we talk about Glasser and see the website. He says that typically almost all misbehavior in a classroom falls under 5 categories. That is, they are aggressive actions. They are verbal or physical attacks on kids or on the teacher. They could be bullying. They could be put downs, jokes that make fun of others. Or they could be immorality acts, such as cheating, lying, and stealing. Or they could be defiance acts, where they refuse to do what you want them to do. Or they could be simple class disruptions, like talking or calling out, blurting out answers when you got your hand raised rule, or walking around the room or clowning around. And then last, just basically what a lot of kids do is just goofing off, of fooling around, of not doing the assigned task, of daydreaming and like that. Typically 5 types of misbehavior that almost could classify almost anything a kid does. But all of those misbehaviors are a consequence of a need not being met. For example, in this cartoon, I didn't mean to be disruptive. It just seemed to me that a serious subject cried out for comic relief, need of not having any fun in class. So we're going to create some. It was kind of funny. Or, geez, who would have thought Mrs. Smith would be a tattletale? Sometimes that's happened to me. Well, let's illustrate Glasser in a different way. I think a way that you'll find very beneficial in your career to use this website. I want you to think of a child in your classroom that's giving you the biggest headache, or a child that you've had, or that you know if you haven't taught before. And in one word, describe that behavior. For example, the class clown, or a liar, or the flirt, or whatever. Think of a child that gave you a big problem that you just didn't know how to handle. You got one? Well, if I was a college, if I was looking at college professors, in a college level, we tend to have these types of disruptive behaviors in our classroom. The Sherman tank, those college kids that enjoy confrontation, always need to be right, will seem to want to argue and even dominate class. Or the sniper that criticizes you, especially behind your back, likes to create that chaos in your classroom and instigates it. Or the exploder that sometimes makes some cutting remarks in your class, and he's happiest when he has control, but when others are passive. Or the complainer, he constantly whines and complains about the syllabus or the rules, or what's going on with other people. Or the person is just totally negative, is never happy, and because he's not happy or she's not happy, wants other people to be happy, and tries to drain the entire class with little nonverbal actions. Or the bulldozer that the only opinion that's right is his, and will try to argue his sort of viewpoint. Or the clam who is silent and non-responsive, and just by looking at him tells you that he's bored or frustrated or upset. And those tend to be the 7 common college disruptive profiles that I would identify. Yours probably would be a little bit different because you're not dealing with adults. But this website called disciplinehelp.com is one I want you to write down to use throughout your career. It's sponsored by the Master Teacher Corporation, which is located out of Lawrence, Kansas, very local. It used to be a book, and then they put it online, and now you have to kind of register, but it's free. But it will have misbehaviors that, in fact, it has 117 misbehaviors that of types of kids that you'll find in your classroom, and it even has sections that you could, in a parent-teacher conference, give your parents to look at to help them control their child's behavior, and additional resources to help. But it's a powerful website that's free. But as I ask you, what child would you identify? And look at some of these just on this page, these first 50. Do you have any angry kids, the bully, the class clown, the con artist, the destroyer, the disrespectful, the dreamer, the exploder, the foul mouth, the gold brick, the hater, the I can't, I don't care, I won't do it, or the idiot syndrome, everybody's an idiot, or the know-it-all, or the last worder, or the lazy guy, or the lewd one, or the lover. It's not my fault, kid, the objector, the procrastinator, the questioner, the selfish, the sleeper, the skipper, the smart aleck, the smart mouth. But we could. There's 117 of these. And if you've got that type of child, what this website asks you to do, well, you pick that. For example, we'll get to talker, but for each of those, they will analyze out of 4 major causes, the major causes of misbehavior, as Glasser says, and they're going to limit it to 4, from attention getting to power seeking to revenge to self-confidence, are 4 major causes of misbehavior, and they'll break that down into 7 primary needs, which are unlearned needs, and 8 secondary needs, which are learned needs, and with the primary needs being lower level Maslow, from hunger, thirst, rest, personal space, elimination of waste, escape from pain, relationship, and then the upper level of Maslow's hierarchy, the secondary needs with more power, status, autonomy, being the height of those secondary needs. So, interesting way of analyzing what motivates and what's behind that typical behavior. And so they ask and will do for you almost a 4-step individual management plan for each of those. And it first asks you have to define exactly what the specific behavior is. And so it even goes into a lot of detail what it looks like, what are the specific characteristics of that behavior. Then it will talk about the effects that behavior has on you as a teacher, and also the effects it has on your class, how it affects other kids. And I know all of you have noticed that if one kid is absent, it does kind of affect and impinge upon the behavior of the entire class. And then it will start to talk about the primary causes, the primary cause, and then the secondary needs that are not being met, so that you kind of know what possibly is motivating that behavior. And then following that, one of the most powerful things they do for you is what are some suggestions, what are some techniques and strategies that you could use to address these needs. And then finally it ends with what are some common mistakes and pitfalls that teachers run into that you should avoid, so that behavior does not perpetuate itself. So, fantastic resource for suggestions. And let's take, for example, the talker. And here we would define talker and list its primary characteristic, what it looks like in class. For example, the kid's a compulsive talker, loves to talk, talks to you, talks to kids, talks to himself a lot of times. usually a poor listener. Sometimes he's just making irrelevant comments at appropriate times. Has a very short attention span, loves attention by talking, usually not motivated, not usually poorly prepared for class. And what effects does the talker have on other kids? Well, a lot of times the teacher and other kids are annoyed at it because it takes time away from them being able to have the spotlight. The classroom lessons are disrupted. It makes starting class difficult. It takes away attention. It distracts everyone's attention. It encourages others to talk. Your authority is undermined because you're not getting him quiet. And then you're put on the defensive, and he claims he's being picked on because he can't talk. But it lists the effects that it possibly would have on you and other kids. And then it would talk about the primary causes. And typically the talker is a way of getting attention, seeks attention. And the primary need is sexuality, and not so much as you might think about it, but that is, he has a strong social need to gain attention, and personal interaction with others is very important, so he wants to dominate that time through talking. And then the secondary need is he's attempting to become more positively involved in the class in an aggressive way. Doesn't realize that he's expressing it in a negative way. Or it could be that it could be an affiliation need, that he doesn't have a real good affiliation with other classmates and is trying to develop that, or his achievements not being met by his satisfaction, and he thinks he can do that through talking, but yet everybody else sees it as disrupting. Or he needs to know he is somebody, and so he tries to do that through monopoly of the time. Well, what then could you do if those might be some of the needs not being met? What could you do? Well, I'm not going to read all through all of these, but the website will give you typically at a minimum a dozen different suggestions. This one gives you 26 suggestions or actions to take or to try. You don't have to try all 26 of them by any means, but it just gives you ideas to handle that talker. And you'll know as you read through them, oh, that's not going to work. Oh, this one might. I might try that one. But it gives you a person kind of talking to you about what could I do. And so I think that's pretty cool. And then last, it will list the mistakes that typically teachers make in handling this type of kid. And you'll probably see yourself in that a couple of times. Oh, I've done this, I did that, shouldn't have done that. So it is a reflective way to get you to look at some possible alternatives to handling a kid in a Glasser orientation. Again, it takes the orientation that to treat all kids the same, you have to treat them differently. For example, you had 26 different things suggested that you could do to help meet the need of that talker. So instead of punishing them every time, as Cantor would say, moving up the hierarchy, here you would look for ways to, and using some of those things in the hierarchy, maybe look to alter to meet that kid's needs so that behavior dissipates. Well, one of the keys in managing the classroom is not so much also, just in addition to the rules and the consequences and the positive and negative reinforcements, is the policies and procedures that you set up to run your classroom. And many of the school policies are already set for you, and as you start day one, you need to know each of those, what you can do about accidents and injuries, what your legal responsibility is, In no way will you ever give kids any medication. It's against, in all 50 states, that's dispensed by the school nurse, and there are 3 legal requirements for that to happen. Knowing the difference between a fire drill, tornado, and intruder alert are highly important. In fact, now schools have many times a disguised intruder alert procedure. One of the local schools has a stapler's been lost, and we believe it's in room 13, and so we'll be on the lookout for the stapler, which means that there is an intruder, and he is around the room number 13. So lock your doors. Some will use color codes, and some will directly just tell you there's an intruder on the loose, and you need to close your door and lock, account for your kids. But knowing that policy is highly important. What's your policy on profanity and tobacco? You know, that varies between grade levels. For example, is poop a bad word? Well, in my wife's 5th grade class, it is. And definitely the word shit would be a bad word. But would poop be a bad word in a 12th grade biology class? Or excrement? You know, defining what is, I think the word crap a lot of times is used, not allowed in the 5th grade, is allowed in middle school and secondary, but deciding what is foul language is oftentimes, what is a display of affection. Can a boy and a girl hold hands in walking down the hallway? Well, definitely not in elementary school. Is it allowed in secondary school? If you allow a boy and a girl to hold hands in secondary school, could 2 males hold hands walking down the room? What would be the procedure for that? Can you spank a kid in the state of Kansas? Is corporal punishment allowed? Well, we're one of the states that does allow corporal punishment, but by legislation, it's not done by a teacher, and by statute, it is administered by the principal, and it's written down as part of the policy of punishment that's given to the parent, and a legal notice has to go out to the parent. You have to find out if there's any medical reason that you can't do it, and it has to be appropriately administered and witnessed. And so, you know, there are very specific policies that follow that, and you will never hit a kid while you're teaching. But those are all policies you need to know as you begin the first day of school. And I'm not going to go over all of these, but having a mentor or having somebody go over these with you so you understand each one is highly important. Setting up routines in the elementary school and middle school and in some secondary schools is a very good way to get kids to do things for themselves, of having job rotation routines. For example, each week you could have each kid be assigned to one of these things, and for example, the joke of the day, that child will have to begin class each day with a joke. And again, you might have to teach what's appropriate and not appropriate. You might have a greeter each day that greets kids that come in. But don't do anything for kids that they can do for themselves. And it helps create a very positive classroom management, an ownership of kids when you have certain job routines that vary throughout the year for each one to do. Typically found very positive in the elementary school. How you begin class, highly important. As the bell rings, do you start right at the bell? Or are you waiting 5 minutes? Kids will be watching that real quickly. As soon as they walk into the door, do you have something on the board for them to do? If you have PA announcements coming, do you role model the way you want them to listen and actually even comment on what was said so you can find out if they did listen? We used to have Channel 1 in many of the schools in the secondary level where they did a 7-minute news broadcast. Those are starting to go by the wayside, but when you watch Channel 1, what is the expected behavior of the student? But sponge activity is highly important. How are you going to take roll? Calling them by name is just not, it's kind of a waste of time. Other ways to find in gym class by seating them on spots. Just by if you're not seated on that spot in the gym floor, you know they're absent. Same way with classroom attendance. Easy way to do that other than spending 5 minutes by calling them out loud. How you have a move in class? Are they allowed to touch your desk or get in your desk? Which I would say is a no. How are you going to signal their student attention, get their attention? A lot of elementary schools will have a teacher simply raise their hand and then they wait till all the hands are raised. And as they raise their hand, they're to be quiet. Could be that you blink the lights. Could be a clap. One teacher used a train whistle, which is kind of cool. But how do you get their attention? What procedure do you use? Are you going to allow them to talk? How are you going to allow them to talk during discussion? Are they going to raise their hand? Are they going to blurt out answers? If you make them raise their hand, then you got to be consistent to call on them before they can reply. But how do you elicit discussion? Do you ask the question and then use a student name at random? So what's your questioning technique? Are you going to allow them to talk during their guided practice? I always think teachers set themselves up for failure to not say what you mean what you say. And when you say, I want total silence, nobody talking. You got 10 minutes to do your work, not a word. And then the first person talking is who? It's typically the teacher. Bobby, do you have your homework done? And then Bobby talks. And, well, technically you didn't say what you meant what you say. And it's almost hard to keep kids totally quiet for 10 minutes. So you teach the behaviors you want. And if they want to talk, it can be using quiet voices. And you teach them those 1.5 foot voices and even teach them the behavior of how loud you're going to allow it to get. Now, one of the local elementary schools, we have a teacher that has a stoplight in there, and it's set with a light meter or a sound meter on it. And when it gets to orange, they got to get quiet. And if it goes to red, then they can't talk for five minutes or whatever time is left. So it monitors it for them. What do kids do when they're finished? Always have that planned. Usually put on the board. You tell them verbally. So that you work them from bell to bell. How do kids turn in papers to the teacher? They pass them to the front on a test, or which bothers other kids, or do they come to the front silently, or do they turn it over and raise their hand and you pick it up? How are you going to have them turn in papers? How are you going to monitor all the kids during instruction? Are you going to put your desk in the back or the front of the room? We're always suggest you put it in the back, because you want your teaching front to be free of distractions. You want it to be your stage. So all of these are policies or procedures that you want to think about as you set up your routines. How are you going to dismiss class and put supplies away? If it's mass chaos, if every kid does it, but if you have a group leader or a row leader, a lot easier. If the bell rings, I would teach kids on the very first day that doesn't mean you get up and walk out. You're the one in control, so you are the one that dismisses them. What about your homework assignments? Are they going to be put on the board on your website, or how are you going to assign homework? Assignment policies such as heading papers, neatness, all need to be explained those first 10 days, usually written down someplace. And then what happens on late and missing work? Here's something to think about. For example, if you say that if I'm not going to accept any late papers. If it's due tomorrow and you don't turn it in tomorrow, you get a 0. Well, let's say you have 100 points possible and the kid doesn't turn in, and each assignment's worth 10 points, and he doesn't turn in his first 3 or 4. Well, what's that kid going to do for the rest of the time? He can't pass. You've already set him up for failure. So you've got a kid that's going to sit there probably and just cause you more trouble. But if you have a policy for let's say, for example, that's more child-friendly, for each day that you're late, you're going to lose a letter grade, and then after 5 days, it's going to be worth, if your passing grade is 70%, it would be worth 69 points. You still get points for doing it, but you're not going to get the maximum points. So, there are some policies that maybe work better for you than others. So you need to think about how are you going to post assignments. If a kid misses, how's he going to find out about it? Do you have a basket for each child that you place that worksheet or that missing work in there? Will it be on the board? Will you tell him as he comes in? Will you hand him the paper and give him a due date for it? How many days he has allowed to turn it in? What if a kid flunks? How are you going to retest any of that? Are you going to have a mastery learning type of situation? What's your evaluation procedures? How do you record grades? And now almost all of it's electronic, and getting it done in a timely manner is kind of important because a lot of parents will check the sites to see how their kids are doing. But all of these are procedures and policies. Think through before you start your class. And then have a system of organizing all this stuff. Where are you going to put all your district communication, your individual school stuff, the memos and emails that are important, principal communications, your evaluations, any comments or things that your kids have done that may be significant that maybe will later come up in some sort of discipline hearing or procedure. How are you going to deal with your lesson plans? If you're an art teacher or an elementary teacher, or how are you going to organize your junk for your art projects and games and the like? So, or your professional association materials. I think always a great one that you ought to do is a substitute plan. That if you just totally get sick, and there's no way that you're going to be able to write any lesson plans for tomorrow, you have a folder tucked away someplace in your desk that you can tell the principal, go to that substitute plan, and it's kind of a generic plan for your day that no matter what you're doing throughout the school year, it would still work for that teacher for that day. Just a great little procedure to make the life of the substitute a little bit better. Actually finding out where everything is, and then also put it in a way that works for you. How are you going to arrange your student desk if you're highly cooperative learning? How are you going to do that with the furniture that you've been given? How are you going to use the overhead projector and screen? If you're in biology classrooms, your eye wash, your emergency call button, and do you have locks for all your chemicals there? For you people elementary with things that most of you will have a sink with running water. Well, it's not real smart to put your electric pencil sharpener right beside the sink. Look for some common sense stuff to get your room laid out in a positive fashion. I like this little idea that these rules are sometimes as you I will not. It's sort of a dare that you give a kid that he's going to try to get by with. When you fashion it as a do not. So a rule could be a dare. A procedure is a do, and the more you can set up your procedures and teach those, it's a step to be learned, and it keeps kids being successful day after day. And a routine, then after first 10 days, it just becomes an automatic way of doing something. So you expect it, and it's just done that way automatically. You don't question it. And if you spend your first 10 days, as Harry Wong says, working on those and teaching those behaviors you want, your life is so much better as you go through the school year. But designing your classroom takes some time sometimes to figure out how you're going to manage the traffic patterns, how you're going to use your floor space. Sometimes our teachers are great at using the ceiling, but sometimes fire marshal impinges upon that. But what do you put up on the bulletin boards to make it print rich? How are you going to use plants? And animals now are restricted in what you can bring in, what you can't bring in, but you're going to have any fish. But the more you make it like home, the chances are the more the kids are going to treat it more respectfully. That makes it child-centered and child-friendly. Are there specific work areas in the elementary classroom? What about your teacher desk? Where it's located is real important. You can see every child and see who enters and exits, and how you use that smart board, where it's located so every kid can see it, or the whiteboards. But all of those will take some time to kind of rearrange and manage. But a kid, love this little cartoon. This is more permanent than I thought. I was assigned a desk. Each kid wants their own space, and providing that own space for them, even in secondary school, when they come in every day, that they sit consistently in the same spot. It's their place, is highly important. A lot of times, if you don't have a seating chart, which is okay for especially upper level classes, they will tend to sit in the same chair they sat in day one. Very little change will occur once they set the pattern, even when you don't have the seating chart. If you look at this elementary classroom, a lot of space to move around the perimeter of the room. You know that this classroom is going to be rather oriented to cooperative learning and to activity-oriented types of activities. Would fit well with that sort of learning environment. If you look at more secondary, here at the right, this is a traditional factory learning model where teacher, his stage is right up here, teacher's desk is in the front, and every kid's facing. It does make it hard to work the room where your back, because your back will always be, if you're talking to this child on guided practice, your back will be, if you're right here, to 2/3 of the classroom. So what we always suggest, you work the parameters of the room first, where you're facing this way, so where you can see every one of the kids as you talk to this kid. As you go to the middle, then you got a little bit of problem, because here your back, if you're facing this kid this way, your back will be to only about 1/3 of the kids, but you'll be able to see most of them. But you tend to work the parameters, and then as you go in the interior, you continue to turn so that you can see most of your kids. But factory model. Here, as we look at more contemporary classrooms, here you've got a stage where the teacher can be in close proximity to most every child. This is optimal because your teaching state is here, projector, nothing really to bother them, be distracting them. Here, you could even move down these aisles, but here every kid can see every kid, except for these, you're looking at the back of the heads, but here every kid can see every kid. Optimal if you like the discussion, if you're very teacher-centered on those secondary layouts. As you look at your management plan, as much as you can, you always want to make things operate as smoothly as they can. And to maintain your system, there are some keys to doing that: orchestration, smoothness, and the like, because you never want to let them see that they got under your skin, because they'll talk about that even for years to come. Remember when old Mr. Runyon did? And it also can get you in trouble when you say things that you don't mean. So these types of skills takes time to develop, but as you develop as a teacher, keep them in the back of your mind for and analyze at the end of the day as you drive home. Did I do this? For example, orchestration is the first one. It's how you keep your lesson going. And just like a conductor conducts an orchestra with all these kids kind of playing their part of the song, so too do you as a teacher orchestrate the lesson, addressing individual student concerns and management concerns, at the same time trying to teach what you want taught. You orchestrate and bring all that to make a good lesson sound good. Is being like a conductor, and it takes skill. And part of that, to orchestrate it, you have to be with it. And withedness is being able to scan, to keep track of all the activities at once. It's, some will say developing eyes in the back of your head, and you do that through listening with your ears and also watching with your eyes. And it might sound strange, but I'll always suggest that you look up and around at every one of your kids every 10 to 15 seconds. Just as a gym teacher would scan the gym every 10 to 15 seconds, so would you scan your classroom to see who's falling asleep, who's not paying attention, and you keep your eye on those kids and redirect them as need be. But if you can't see it, you can't correct it. So withedness is developing those eyes in the back of your head and looking up and scanning that classroom every 10 to 15 seconds. Overlapping is doing more things at once. And that's a hard skill to learn because and certain people are better at it than others, but it's handling multiple tasks, doing 5 things at once. And the elementary teacher a lot of times will have a kid grabbing his leg, about ready to throw up. You got another one over here doing, and you try to manage all 3 or 4 of those kids at once, quickly and concisely. And overlapping is a key to that, doing multiple things and handling multiple tasks. Momentum is a pace, and the text writes about pace, I think pretty effectively. But how do you teach to a class? What is, we used to teach, you teach to the average child, but I don't know which one is the average child. So how fast or slow do you go? But momentum deals with that answer of how you pace your class, how you avoid fragmentation, and staying on the content way too long, or dwelling on a behavior way too long. But it's keeping that lesson going at a pace where all your kids, majority of your kids are with you. And that's a skill that takes several years to master. Smoothness is the continuity of a lesson, of avoiding the flip-flops of distractions or intrusions. And intrusions that occur all the time, but smoothness would be able to bring them easily back on track with some sort of segue. And the more little tricks of the trade you have, the easier it is to develop that continuity. Some other tricks of the trade are giving kids at the beginning of the class a heads up of what's coming, telling them what you're going to do today. First 15 minutes we're going to probably do this, and we're going to look at this, and what's going to happen, so they kind of see the big picture. And a lot of times telling them that your class period is only going to be, if you're going to have a short period day, you tell them we got a short period, and explain why and exactly what's going to happen. It kind of keeps kids on track, so there's no surprises. The kids just don't like surprises. Planned ignoring is, I like to say, don't sweat the small stuff, but a lot of times behavior is to seek attention, and sometimes just by not giving it, by ignoring it once or twice, it goes away. But you only do that when it's really not influencing others. But you can, you don't want to dwell on everything. You want to kind of pick your battles. And planned ignoring sometimes is very helpful when you got the experience to know what battle to fight. And then sometimes you're just boring. Be honest with you, And you need to boost the interest. So when you start seeing that nonverbal communication of boredom, you change your approach. You tell a joke, you tell a story, or you ask a kid to tell a story, or you could have them do one of the many 50 different Kagan activities or other activities to energize your classroom to interact or use that information. Or you could have them do a standing O, or but there's all kinds of ways to kind of take a 30-second break to boost the interest. Some of us just aren't very humorous. Others of us are. But humor, great way to manage your classroom and sometimes diffuse very heated situations to get kids to relax. But humor is a powerful tool in managing classrooms. And then just getting rid of things that you know are going to cause problems, that will cause mischievous behavior. You just make sure they're out of your classroom, but you just know will cause problems. So tricks of the trade, you'll learn as time goes on. When we talked about the scanning, the 15 seconds is also part of positioning, so you can see it. Just as a referee has to be in good position to make a call in basketball or football, so too do you need to be to have those eyes in the back of your heads. If kids are taking a test, you need to not be so much in the front of the rooms where they can see you. I'd place yourself in the back or side and continue to move. But scanning is not just always done with your eyes, but also with listening. It just takes time to do that. Involving the home is a key, and I said we would come back to this postcard business, but communicating with the home. This idea, especially I could do it in any K through 12 classroom, but works best in elementary school and middle school. Get you a set of postcards, and some schools even print them up for you. In Pittsburgh, they're called Bragging Dragons, but you have a postcard, and first or second day of class, you have your kids fill out 2 or 3 of these postcards with their caregiver's address on it, and then you just put them in your desk drawer. And if in the first month you could find for every one of those children, maybe first 5 days, you pick 5 or 6 kids each day, and you write a note on it, a very short note of what he did well or she did well that day, and just send it. Drop it in as you leave the school, have it sent home. And then by the first month, you've tried to get every one of those kids at least a postcard sent home. And then the first piece of communication that comes home to that parent, it's a positive one, and a lot higher probability that they're going to be on your side if some problem does develop, because most of the communication a parent gets from a school is just simply informative or it's negative. So sending something positive home, a great way to develop a positive relationship with parents. And then kids like to know. In fact, if you don't even tell the kid and the parent tells the kid, that's secondhand is really kind of cool to that kid. Well, we've given you a lot of different ideas, 2 different theories to look at on the continuum, and there's much more with Fred Jones, Harry Wong, and others that you're going to, as you go through your career, specifics, and as you read the text, it would be much more specific. But I think management sort of begins with believing, and let me have it. Well, management begins with believing in kids and having a system in place so that they can reach their goals. So let's kind of review real quickly through a maxim, through some general truths. I think you have seen that effective teachers, they manage a classroom, and the ineffective teachers discipline a classroom. Big difference in the way you perceive management and disciplining. I think a key to any sort of teacher that believes in kids is to say what you mean and mean what you say. So you get them to follow the right path, and that you're not telling them 5 or 6 times. That kids can't play the game. They can't get ready for college or the workforce if they don't know the rules and to learn how to behave and to operate in a system of rules. And kids will tend to abide by those rules if they have a chance to have ownership in them, because they tend not to break the things that they own. And you as a teacher, if you really want a procedure or a rule to be enforced, you have to teach it. You have to show what it looks like and to demonstrate and model it and reinforce it if you want to keep it throughout the months that follow. And if you can't see it, you can't reinforce it, so you've got to scan. You can't reinforce it if you can't see it. So you're always looking around and listening. And then learning as you develop in your career what the small stuff is. What are the battles that you're going to fight? Because you can't fight them all. And so you decide what the small stuff is, and that will vary from teacher to teacher. But a key to getting kids to abide by any sort of system you develop is not so much punishing them every time they break it, but to also catch them being right. You attract so much more by being positive. And the more you can teach on your time and to correct on theirs, the better it's going to be for you and the better it's going to be for them. And lastly, or close to last, it's not so much how we reinforce our plan. It's really how kids receive it. If kids find attention a positive thing, don't keep sending them there. Find something that works. It's not so much what you do, it's how the kids perceive it. And no kid, no one or teacher can sustain learning to constantly seeing the glass as half empty by constantly telling a kid what all his misbehaviors. So look for the positive. Focus on the behavior anytime you have to discipline a kid, and not so much the person. And anytime, don't do anything kids can do for themselves. Have them do those things that need to be done. A teacher on her feet's worth two in the seat. You can't see it if you're not up and around, and don't want you to be like the movie Teacher, where the movie starts with a social science teacher sitting at his desk reading his newspaper, and your bell rings, kids come in, pick up a worksheet, sit down. 5 minutes later in the movie goes on, bell rings, kids put their worksheet on the other side of the desk and leave, and he's still reading his newspaper. And throughout the movie, this goes on every 5 to 10 minutes and throughout the whole day. And then at the end of the movie, as the credits are running, the janitor comes in, the teacher's still reading his newspaper, and we find out that the teacher had died and rigor mortis had set in, and he had worksheeted them to death. And don't be that guy. Model what you preach. Modeling is by far the best sermon. So if you want kids to respect you, you've got to respect them. Well, we probably overwhelmed you here in this video, all the different ideas from Glasser's control theory to all the procedures and policies you can establish to maintain an effective classroom learning environment, and also looking at the different tricks of the trade of things we should do or maybe shouldn't do. Hope you found it beneficial.